As he'd hoped, the Trebuchet had been mirroring the Hunchback's approach, skirting the walls of the stadium to ensure the more nimble Phoenix Hawk could not jump between them. Unfortunately, that also kept the Treb pilot from having an easy escape route as John charged the other battlemech. The Trebuchet lit off its trio of medium lasers, flaying armor from the Dwane battlemech's left arm and torso, but the range was too close to fire their long-range missiles with any accuracy. Seeing his opportunity, John shot his own armament in succession, chain-firing his main laser battery. His large laser carved armor from the chest, while the first of his medium lasers sliced above the other mech's hip. The second medium laser seemed to follow the large laser, and slipped into the crack in the armor opened by one of his earlier shots. Mortal Stakes, page 157, by Michael J. Cervella. The Trebuchet is love. The Trebuchet is life. Okay, maybe not. The Trebuchet is an often forgotten peer among a crowd of some of the most beloved battlemechs in the BattleTech universe. It's a strange duck in that its strengths required a nuanced understanding of both in-universe lore as well as the mech's role on the tabletop. And if there's anything people are really good at, it's nuanced and well-balanced takes on games. This 50-ton veteran of the 3025 technical readout has faced some tough challenges over the years. Personally, I was lukewarm on the Trebuchet until I saw the art for it in the 3050 technical readout, after which point I swore the mech off entirely for roughly 2 decades.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the is that?
The combination of eggplant frame and Darth Vader helmet was enough for me to not give the mech a chance, and I regret that. Thankfully, the modern take on the design much more accurately represents what was always intended to be a pretty sleek look, as originally envisioned by Dwane Loose in the OG 3025 technical readout. The stellar reimagining of the battlemech from Alan Blackwell and the resulting plastic mini went a long way to convincing me to give it another chance. The story of the Trebuchet begins in the design and meeting rooms of Korean enterprises with the goal of creating a new mainline battlemech. By 2780, the machine that successfully survived the iterative design process looked remarkably different from what most fans of the Trebuchet would get to know and love during the later Succession Wars. The TBT-3C was bristling with the latest and greatest in Star League technology. Crafted out of endosteel wrapped around a 300XL fusion engine, precious mass was saved in order to buy room for hefty LRM-15s boosted with Artemis IV fire control systems. With 3 tons of ammunition, each launcher could fire 12 times before the mech would need to see resupply or make the choice to push forward with the 4 standard medium lasers split between the left and right arms. Their combined 20 damage was respectable and sustainable thanks to the use of cutting-edge double heat sink technology incorporated into the mech. Protected by 8.5 tons of standard plate armor, the Trebuchet 3C was seen as a powerful option for a variety of battlefield roles. In practice, it proved to be a bit too lightly armored for frontline duty, especially with that XL engine installed. Having just 13 points of protection on a side torso meant that just a couple of repeated hits risked disabling the mech. The debate over the effectiveness of the 3C proved to be rather pointless, as in August of 2781 the Star League was dissolved. Bold plans for automated production lines producing thousands of trebuchets for the SLDF evaporated under the real politic of an inner sphere on fire. Ever-savvy Korean enterprises rapidly pivoted to redesign the trebuchet so it could be produced much cheaper and without reliance upon highly technical pieces of equipment that could not be guaranteed as the first Succession War set in. The resulting variant, designated the TBT-5N, became the standard which most fans of the trebuchet know and love. The Korean Model 9C chassis was a significant downgrade from the endosteel, but this will be the theme for the 5N, so gird your loins. The Magna 250 standard fusion engine also dropped the trebuchet's movement profile to 580, but it did slightly improve the mech's survivability, but not much. A ton of armor had to be shaved off as well to buy mass for use elsewhere, leaving the 5N with a paltry 7.5 tons of standard plate. Standard Zeus-produced LRM-15s continued to be the mech's primary weapons, though they would have to get by without the Artemis IV fire control systems. Additionally, a ton of ammunition had to be cut, leaving each launcher with just 8 shots. While the instinct might be to conserve that ammunition for the perfect moment, mech warriors were actually incentivized to expend their ammunition as quickly as possible, especially from that left arm launcher, because the torso critical locations are almost entirely devoid of other items. In the case of the critical internal hit on the left torso, a single ton of LRM ammunition is the only available item to hit. It's only marginally better on the right torso since the LRM launcher is at least there to take up 3 out of the 4 critical hit locations. With only 11 points of protection on the 5N side torsos, the Trebuchet's mechwarrior needed to be very careful about not wandering into the fray. Now, as rough as this sounds, it's not that much worse than some of the other Succession Wars mechs. Even the Centurion 9A, considered a rough and tumble battle mech, had only 13 points of side torso armor to protect 2 tons of ammunition on each of its sides. The legendary Hunchback 4G had its own issues with its left torso criticals only consisting of 2 tons of AC-20 ammunition, which is absolutely terrifying. With that perspective, perhaps the Trebuchet 5N doesn't have it as bad as previously assumed. Once the LRMs are expended, or nearly so, the 5N could still participate in a fight with its 3 Magna Mark II standard medium lasers, 2 in the right arm and 1 in the left. This was 1 fewer than the original 3C, but we're cutting costs and corners around here, so get used to it. With just 10 standard heat sinks, heat generation is only a minor issue so long as the medium lasers and LRM-15s aren't being fired at the same time. If they were, that would leave the 5N at 11 plus heat into the red if the mech is on the run. If one only fired the LRM launchers while running, the heat is only 2 plus. If only the lasers are fired while on the run, it's 1 plus into the red. All very doable. Embracing the concept of it is what it is, the Trebuchet 5N went into full production, not for the SLDF, but instead filling massive contracts for the Free Worlds League military. It was, after all, the beginning of the Succession War, and every major house was trying to not just build up their forces, but also replace equipment following staggering losses of manpower and machines. In the field, it's said that the Trebuchet became known as a strong team player in any given lance. The ability to pepper targets with those twin LRM-15s and then rush in to contribute to the brawl made it a valuable component in a variety of missions. In 2787, the Trebuchet would have the opportunity to prove itself as the militaries of the Federated Suns and those of the Draconis Combine clashed in the Cephal system. The Trebuchets and the AFFS took on the role of mobile fire support, raining down LRMs onto the prepared fortifications of the Combine, rendering defenders battered and demoralized before the main Davion assault moved into firing range. On the opposite side of the Inner Sphere, the Combine used Trebuchets in their defense of the planet Suk 2 against the Lyran attack in 2880. Dug into a strong position, the Kuritan commander wisely used his Trebuchets to hammer the Lyrans anytime they massed for an assault against the defensive lines. As the battle dragged on, heavy losses diminished the power of both sides, but the Trebuchets were able to give better than they got, and ultimately the Lyrans were forced to abandon their attempt at conquest. Diane McWilliams' riflemen and Mary Lasker's Trebuchet combined their fire to strip armor off their target. The Trebuchet's twin LRM's flights bracketed the Panther and blasted every shred of armor from both arms. 4 of the LRMs smashed into the Panther's head and ripped away part of its armor, giving the mech a torn lip and a scorched face. The rifleman's autocannon fire easily peeled off the Panther's chest armor, while its pair of medium lasers melted all but the last of the enemy mech's right leg. Warrior on Guard, page 200 by Michael A. Stackpole. Over the years, there were some attempts to tweak the Trebuchet platform to make it suitable for more specific needs. One of the early variants was the TBT-5J, which sacrificed the ARM-mounted LRM-15 launcher in favor of adding 5 jump jets and 5 additional single heatsinks. This pushed the movement profile to 585 and made the 5J very heat efficient for an early Succession Wars battle mech. An additional half-ton of armor, pushing up to 8 tons, was nice to see. Losing that second LRM-15 hurts a bit, but the 5J leans into it with the close-range agile fighting role rather than the mid-fire support. Overall, it's neat to have the option for a jumpy Trebuchet that early in the timeline. If you're looking for something geared more toward close-range conflict resolution, the TBT-5S introduced in 2864 could fit the bill. Swapping out the LRM-15s for a pair of SRM-6s, the Trebuchet 5S was reforged into a close-range dedicated brawler. It was even pretty efficient with heat, as 8 additional heat sinks were added to the mech, bringing the total to 18. In a full alpha strike while on the run, the 5S ended up at just 1+ heat into the red. That allowed this variant to run and gun for 5 consecutive turns before suffering any penalties. The other possibly overlooked benefit was that the 2 extra heat sinks in each side torso made hitting that ammunition that much more difficult for an opponent. Gold star for the day, heat sinks. As the Succession War became the Succession Wars, the Trebuchet endured, largely thanks to multiple production sites pumping out as many of the little buggers as possible. Among the forces of the Free Worlds League, the Trebuchet was often paired with archers to boost an already enjoyable flurry of LRMs, while also offering some close-range mobility and protection from bothersome light mechs that might wander too close. Another heavy fire lance configuration placed 2 Trebuchets with an archer and a centurion for the muscle. All things considered, the plucky Trebuchet was seemingly appreciated by those who had one in their ranks. The Inner Sphere wouldn't see another official variant until 3025 with the introduction of the TBT-7K Trebuchet. Longtime BattleTech fans, or really anyone who can identify patterns, can predict what weapon the K version might have crammed onto it. I'll give you a second to catch your breath here as we find out that yes, the 7K carries a particle projection cannon. Deep breath. You good? Alright. Backing up the beautiful man-made lightning weapon was a standard AC-5 autocannon in the left torso, fed by 1 ton of ammunition in the right torso. Finally, an SRM-2 was added to the right arm, which drew its ammunition from the hopper in the same arm. The movement profile didn't change, and neither did the 7.5 tons of standard plate armor, but it did receive an 11th heatsink, which is nice anytime you're putting a PPC onto a mech. The heat management challenge for the 7K is acceptable, though firing just the PPC while on the run did yield that +1 into the red. A full alpha strike, including the SRM-2, which I assume you've packed with Inferno ammunition, earned the mech 4+ into the red. It's doable once, but any more than that and the mech without much armor ended up being an easier target. The 7K just cracks me up because it's just the most Kuritan thing to do to take a medium missile boat and yank out the missiles in favor of a PPC. Oh, Draconis Combine, never change. Alexis unloaded on it with everything she had. Her PPCs arced lightning, brilliant blue light against the purple sky. Then she fired a salvo of missiles, mixing their smoke into the dusty air. One PPC shot missed, but the other ripped a deep gash in the Trebuchet's stomach. Then the missiles hit, cascading their explosions across its front, cracking bits of armor and creating openings for her to do some real damage. By the time she fired her autocannons, which both missed at the extreme range, the Trebuchet had launched another salvo of missiles, filling her view screen with the charred scoring and the bright light of explosions. The majority of the missiles hit her legs, and her right began flashing yellow on her damage indicator on the console. Without question, page 225, by Brian Young. With the rediscovery of lost Star League technology, the Trebuchet 3C rose from the grave like your great-aunt Tammy when you forgot to keep your deathbed promise to clean her silverware every year if it needed it or not. We've all been there. Across 3 different production lines and 3 different companies, each sought to produce an updated Trebuchet design that borrowed heavily from the original 3C variant. By 3048, the first runs of the TBT-7M marched off the assembly lines sporting endosteel, 10 double heat sinks, an XL fusion engine, and 5 jump jets, which pushed the movement profile to 585. The 7.5 tons of standard plate armor wasn't touched, and neither was the basic loadout of the 2 LRM-15s and 3 standard medium lasers. While the 7M did lack the Artemis IV fire control systems of the 3C, it did have enough mass left over for the addition of a NARC missile beacon launcher in the left torso along with 2 tons of beacons. The last change to the design was the addition of case to both side torsos to keep mech warriors alive should that LRM ammunition receive a critical hit and self-actualize as an all-consuming fireball. It's a shockingly restrained refit using that new technology. One might be forgiven for expecting Korean to jam on LRM-20s somehow, or add an ER large laser with single heatsinks. I'm not bitter, I swear. Verdant shafts of laser light stabbed into Habeas Corpus's torso, superheating its hull enough that Trenton felt the hits as ferroceramic armor panels ruptured off the frame. The Wolf pilot then lifted the mech's arm-mounted LRMs, likely out of habit. This close range, the warheads wouldn't have enough time to arm, and there was little chance this Treb had been refitted with clan missile racks that could injure at any range. But the Wolf fired anyway. Letter of the Law, page 94, by Philip A. Lee. Amidst the chaos of the 3050s, and before the chaos of the 3060s and the chaos of the 3070s, the Trebuchet received another revamp in the form of the TBT-9K. This 3059 variant was based upon the 7M's design, employing endosteel, the XL engine, double heatsinks, and that 585 movement profile. In a shocking move, the 9K also saw the mech's first substantial armor increase, up to 9 tons of standard plate. Now finally, our friend the Trebuchet could be not quite so much of a paper tiger. For weaponry, the LRMs were swapped out for a pair of MRM-20s, one in the left arm and one in the right torso. For the old schoolers who don't know, the drawback for the increased number of missiles on the 3.8-15 range profile, besides that shorter range, was the +1 penalty to accuracy. The benefits to the MRM over the LRMs are the possible increased damage output and the lack of a minimum range. The MRM launchers were fed by 3 tons of case-protected ammunition stored in the left torso. That's 18 shots per launcher if you're not an MRM fan. 2 medium pulse lasers were added to the right arm, and a standard medium laser remained in the left arm. Finally, a C3 slave computer was added to the left torso. The Trebuchet 9K is tougher, can hit harder up close, and plays well with others thanks to the inclusion of that C3 system. Not too shabby. If you're not a fan of the medium-range missile launchers, the 3071 variant, designated the TBT-8B, may be more your style. While it did take advantage of the XL engine, the 8B had a standard internal structure and was protected by the classic 7.5 tons of standard plate armor. The mech's jump jets were retained to keep that 585 movement profile, which I appreciate. Playing into its generalist role, 4 multi-missile 5 launchers were installed into the 8B, 2 into the left arm and 2 into the right torso. They were fed by just 3 tons of ammunition, either LRMs, SRMs, or a mixture to your liking. This added flexibility was bolstered by the inclusion of 13 double heatsinks and 4 ER medium lasers, all placed into the right arm. The end result was a Trebuchet platform which was remarkably flexible for battlefield needs. If firing SRMs, the 4 MMLs can do up to 40 damage. Adding in the 3 ER medium lasers pushes that possible damage to 55. The heat generation for that shot left the mech at 3+ on the run. But you could toss in that last ER medium laser for 5 additional damage and end up at +8 into the red. While this would carry with it a couple of penalties in the future, this is now. Let future you worry about future problems. The TBT-8B Trebuchet is solid and one of the Blakest era variants, which really does a good job of boosting a mech's theme. Give it a go should you have the opportunity. Lowry turned slightly, scanning the smoky ruin there. Yes, she saw them. Mechs were moving again beyond the spill of fire-blackened rubble that once had been the far wall of the courtyard. A Trebuchet hulked behind the tumble-down wall opposite. As it strode closer, it paused, left and right arms raised to volley fire their 3 lasers in rippling spurts of brilliant white light. Other mechs, shadowy figures in the clinging, opaque smoke, moved closer. Operation Excalibur, page 234, by William H. Keith, Jr. Now, it is crucially important that we don't skip over the next variant, because the last thing I want is a bunch of angry fans of the touring Concordat showing up at the Mechfrog compound with pitchforks and torches. The TBT XK7 was an experimental trebuchet design project funded by Vandenberg Mechanized Industries on Pinard and run by Kirsten Askelson, the supervising technician. The goal was to create a cutting-edge brawling battle mech that incorporated a litany of new technologies. After 7 years of largely unsuccessful work, in mid-3081 the Trebuchet XK7 emerged from the laboratory hangar. 4 of these prototypes were produced, and they sure are something. Constructed from endosteel and a 250XL engine, the Trebuchet doesn't immediately look too different from previous variants. However, the 10.5 tons of armor and 3 additional tons of modular plate bulks up this design considerably. Also, triple-strength myomer was used in order to boost the movement profile of the machine back up to 584 and add a little bit more for physical damage. For the uninitiated, the modular plate armor provided an additional 10 points of armor to a location where it is added at the cost of 1 movement point and an additional 1+ to piloting skill rolls. As you can see in the armor diagram, this is one very tough trebuchet. The XK7's weaponry was interesting as it included a chain whip in the right arm. Now before we go any further, I do need to call a timeout so we can discuss a personal pet peeve with the BattleTech rulebooks as they currently stand. When you look up the chain whip in Tactical Operations Advanced Rules, you see a big block of text explaining the rules for hitting and tripping up an opponent on a hit. All great, no problem there. Unfortunately, if you want to know how much damage the chain whip does, it's not included in the TAC Ops rulebook. It tells you that for that damage, it matches the rules for the sword, which are found in the Total Warfare book. In very nearly the same amount of space explaining that, you could have just put the damage in the section where all the rest of the weapon's rules are explained in detail. Besides the thrill one might feel from sending someone to an entirely different rulebook, what possible purpose is served in doing it this way? It doesn't save space, because you had to explain that the damage was found elsewhere. Just write the damage instead. This is maddening. Sorry, where were we? As mentioned in my unhinged rant, the chain whip actually does damage in 1 damage per 10 ton of the mech's weight with a -2 to hit modifier. So 5 damage on the XK7 until the triple strength Myomer comes in. Additionally, the chain whip rules for TAC Ops explain that it can trip and hinder an opponent depending upon where it hits the target. We're not going to go into the details here, but now you know where to go if you want to find out. An ER medium laser was installed into the left arm, which was the mech's longest range weapon. Moving in, a Streak SRM-6 was added to the left arm with its ammunition stored in the left torso. At even closer ranges, a medium pulse laser sat in the right torso, and an ER flamer was added to the left torso. A second cosmetic and non-functional ER flamer was also added to the left torso for what I assume is making sure infantry don't wander anywhere near this walking war crime. Finally, a small shield was added to the left arm, completing what looks like more of a gladiatorial battle mech seen on Solaris than a functioning Periphery powerhouse. Overall, it's an interesting mesh of a lot of bells and whistles that would make for a possibly fun experience so long as you and your opponent are well versed in the rules for everything. If not, then this is not a battle mech for beginners. In the uncertain and shell-shocked years following the Word of Blake kerfuffle, lessons learned from the brutal conflict started to show up in mech prototypes across the inner sphere. For Kallio Industries, their K7R trebuchet design reflected that collective trauma. When the company heard about the existence of the XK7 project underway in Taurian space, the CEO of Kallio sought out all of the information she could get on the strange design. Using the procured intel as a guide, the Kallio designers first replicated the XK7 and then modified it to fit needs and address several issues they identified as problematic or made the mech too difficult to maintain in real-world conditions. The resulting K7R looks similar to its inspiration, but with several key differences. One of the first items swapped out was the expensive XL engine. It was replaced by a 250 light fusion engine. The triple-strength Myomer was retained, as well as the endo-steel frame and the 10.5 tons of standard armor. The chain whip remained in the right arm, but the shield in the left arm was pulled from the build. 2 ER medium lasers were added to the conventional ranged punch, 1 in the right torso and 1 in the left arm. The Streak SRM-6 in the right torso was there, and its 1 ton of ammunition was in the left torso, protected by case. 2 real ER flamers were added to the left torso, and to complete the design's mission of becoming a real pain in the butt, a mech taser was added to the left arm. The mech's 10 double heat sinks are borderline adequate for the job, but with the triple strength Myomer, the goal is to run warm for the speed boost. Getting in close and firing the taser while using the whip to trip up a target had to be the name of the game. With the 2 ER flamers running, the poor mech singled out for attention could end up overheated and slowed by this wily trebuchet. Due to the K7R's very unique role and loadout, there were no official production lines set up to produce this variant. Instead, it was offered as an after-sale refit for interested clients. Word has it that the Republic of the Sphere was one of the more notable purchasers of this battle mech. "On target," he murmured, watching his heads-up display. The trebuchet was about 400 meters away, edged around a bristly patch of briarwoods while its arm-mounted long-range missile batteries cycled. The medium support mech massed fewer tons than Nathan's rifleman, but just about matched him in armor. The Garrett D2J targeting computer painted a red crosshair across the Trebuchet's purple highlighted frame, and then shimmered it to gold. Nathan squeezed the triggers beneath his middle fingers. On either arm, the lower of the paired weapon barrels exploded into 3-meter gouts of flame as the 60mm autocannon spat depleted uranium slugs downrange. Both streams of high-velocity metal exploded against the Trebuchet's torso armor, staggering the medium mech. Nathan shouted in triumph as the insignia of the 3rd Merrick Militia was erased by his fire, leaving only tattered armor and smoke behind. Godfather, page 244 through 245, by Jason Schmetzer. Counterattack, Battlecore Anthology, Volume 5. Taking a big leap down the timeline to 3131, we need to spend some time with the newest 3 variants of the Trebuchet. 2 are production runs, and the 3rd is a one-of special design. Let's dive in. The TBT-9R saw production as a pricey yet powerful design that took advantage of seemingly every mass-saving feature available. The endosteel frame was not unexpected, nor the use of 9.5 tons of light ferrofibrous armor. What will take your breath away is the inclusion of an XXL engine, which helps to push the overall estimated price for the 9R to north of 40 million C-bills. Pause the video and restart it once you're finished driving. The initial 711 movement profile could be boosted temporarily to 714 with the installation of a supercharger in the center torso. On its own, this equipment is not for the faint of heart. The use of a supercharger on a mech with an XXL engine is enough to make most quartermasters drink Malox directly out of the bottle. All of this speed and expensive equipment was in service of bringing 3 ClanTech LRM-15s to the battlefield, all fed by 5 tons of case-protected ammunition in the left torso. For those of you who, like me, went to public school, that's 13 shots per launcher with 1 to spare for a parting shot on your way back to base. If you are foolhardy enough to get anywhere near an enemy in the 9R, it does also carry 2 medium X pulse lasers which can reach out to 9 hexes and benefit from that -2 accuracy boost. The mech's 10 double heatsinks are adequate for firing from distance while on the move, but can be inadequate for getting up close and bringing the X pulse lasers into play as well. I know my bias against the XXL engines is in play here, so I'll try to restrain myself. Just keep in mind that for the price of 1 Trebuchet 9R, you could buy 4 7Ms and have almost enough for a 5th. Amos, she called. Cover the right and I'll take the left. A barrage of missiles from a nearby pirate trebuchet cut off her order from ever happening. The missiles enveloped Amos's Orion in a ball of orange and crimson flames, and it crashed near her. The vibration of its impact shook her in her seat, and then she heard the warning signal of the Jägermech's weapons locking onto her. By Blood Betrayed, page 13 by Blaine Lee Pardoe. 5 years later, Zvastar Enterprises released a modified subvariant of the 9R designated the 9N, which still utilized some clan technology but removed the absurd XXL engine in favor of a comparatively cheaper XL version. I can't believe I just said the XL version was cheap. Instead, an XL gyro was installed to save mass, and only 2 ClanTech Regulan LRM-15s were used, 1 in the left arm and 1 in the right torso. The paired launchers were fed by 3 tons of Case 2 protected ammunition in the left torso. For close range self-defense, 3 medium variable speed pulse lasers were added to the left and right arms. With a 690 movement profile, 9.5 tons of light ferrofibrous armor, and 11 double heatsinks, the 9N is fairly survivable, and no one will be tempted to supercharge themselves into the poorhouse. Heat generation isn't an issue with the 11 double heatsinks unless alpha striking while on the run with those VSP lasers. Overall, this is a much more restrained update to the Trebuchet and a more realistic one for your pocketbooks, with an estimated price of just 10.6 million C-bills, roughly 1/4 of the price of the 9R. Our last official configuration was the one-of design created for the Royal Fantasy Solaris tournament in 3140. Nicknamed the Merda, this mech was a refit from the TBT-7M. Tief Brave went to work updating the mech with 10 tons of reflective armor and the installation of 2 ClanTech Streak LRM-15 launchers along with 4 tons of Case 2 protected ammunition. 2 ER medium lasers in the right arm added mid and short range punch, and finally a small vibroblade was added to the left arm. If you want the specific rules for the vibroblade, go to the Battle Mech manual rather than TAC Ops, because TAC Ops doesn't include the damage for each blade size when activated. Why would they? Why would life be made easier for you? I don't know. I don't write these books. The TBT-7mm Merta was fielded by Kaylee McDonald, who was a mech warrior who fought for Team Brave under a free agent contract. Known for her red hair, jade green eyes, and thick Gaelic accent, there was no mistaking that she heralded from Skye within the Lyran Commonwealth. As a warrior, McDonald was fearsome and known for being accurate with her long-range missile fire. This variant of the Trebuchet with 2 clan streak LRMs only compounded that lethality. Her dueling record of 35, 16, and 19 suggests this was true more often than it was false. It's a neat mech and worth trying out if you want to experiment with clan streak LRMs. Now before we get going and wrap up, I do wish to share my totally unofficial and non-canon Trebuchet variant I have designated the TBT-1MF. It features a 690 movement profile and is technically a mixed inner-sphere clan tech design, though the only clan technology is found in the weapons and not in the structure. The MF benefits from endosteel, a light fusion engine, an XL gyro, and 9 tons of ferrofibrous armor. 12 double heatsinks keep the mech relatively cool while running around. Keeping the theme of the Trebuchet as a mixed, flexible fighter, I've installed a multi-missile 7 launcher into the right torso, and it's fed by 2 tons of ammunition stored in the Case 2 protected left torso. Splitting the ammo types between LRM and SRM or any of the other specialty types allows the Trebuchet 1MF to be everyone's problem all the time. Starting at 15 hexes and closer, the plasma rifle in the right arm offers a consistent 10 damage plus its heat effects to targets, and it's fed by 2 tons of ammunition stored in the left torso. Not because it can explode, but to offer the engine and MML ammunition some buffer in case of a critical hit. Finally, 2 Clan Tech ER medium lasers sit in the right arm, offering parallel range profiles to the plasma rifle and providing 7 additional damage punches if the Trebuchet chooses to close in on a target. The heat generation with a full alpha strike while on the run is 2+ into the red, which is entirely manageable, and the damage from the strike is a potential 38 plus the plasma rifle's heat effects, which is not half bad. There's plenty of ammunition for the MML and rifle, so campaigns are doable. What do you think? If you want to give the Trebuchet 1MF a try, I've included a PDF of its record sheet in the video notes below. So why do we love the Trebuchet? Starting out rough and growing into greatness is a story with which many can identify. While likely not high on the list of anyone's most played from the 3025 TRO, the mech did perform a valuable function and could be a fair threat on the battlefield. We discussed it on the Discord server, and I noted that the Trebuchet is likely not going to be an MVP of a battle, but it will help the MVP get there. It's a team player battle mech, and those are crucial for keeping the game lively, lest we all just run Timberwolves and Marauders all the time. BattleTech has so many unique battle mechs to explore, and the Trebuchet easily stands as a viable battlefield choice across the timelines. What do you think? Does the Trebuchet make a frequent appearance on your table, or did you forget that it existed? What do you think of the new CGL sculpt for it? I'm pretty fond of it. Let me know in the video comments and we'll keep the discussion going. Thank you as always for coming out today to play in the BattleTech universe. It's been a wonderful year for the channel, and looking down the road, I'm excited to keep it going well into 2025 with your support. If you haven't already, hitting that like or subscribe button will make sure the YouTube algorithm is happy, and as a result, you'll be much more likely to see my nonsense in the future. Going the extra step and becoming a channel member or supporting on Ko-fi will go a long way to making sure I can keep this project going. I really do appreciate it and the opportunity to do my part to support BattleTech. With that, I'll say have an awesome week. Please stay positive and go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.